Hi, my name is Swapna Kakani. Thank you, IFFGD, for inviting me and having me speak. I will be sharing a glimpse of my 30-plus year journey with short bowel syndrome. I was born with a congenital defect of the small intestine called multiple intestinal atresia in 1989, 31 years ago. In 1989, the prognosis to live long with short bowel syndrome and on IV nutrition was unknown. It was actually the surgeon who told us take one day at a time. But more importantly, my parents were the ones who said, we are going to appreciate each day alive and healthy with this new baby girl. And together as a family, we are going to fight for every milestone, regardless if it comes or not. This is going to be our new normal. I want to say now a kind of a disclaimer that because I was born in 1989, it is important to know that this is just one example or one journey of living with short bowel syndrome long term. And the field, the treatments, the advancements in IV nutrition and medical care for short bowel syndrome has changed drastically in the last 3 decades. The decisions that we have made as a family may be different than the decisions other families may make or even have the options to make today. From day 2 of life, I became dependent on nutrition from an IV, TPN, total parenteral nutrition. I received TPN anywhere from as little as 3 nights a week to 7 nights a week. The infusions could last as little as 8 hours to as long as 16 hours. I would get most, if not all, my calories from TPN, as well as my feeding tube in my stomach. I received nutrition from a gastrostomy tube called Enteral Nutrition. I have received enteral nutrition 16 hours a day, every day for my first 20 years of life. And TPN, I have received for the last 28 years and counting. There have been only 3 years as a child that I did not receive TPN, but I did not grow or gain weight. I was told, go eat. Please eat anything, whatever you would like. And in the 1990s, we did not know the diets we now recommend for short bowel syndrome and intestinal failure. It was really for the purpose of getting familiar with food. But although I could eat, I was not very interested in eating, and I ate like a bird. I would eat the same meal, drink the same drink for hours at a time. My favorite food, potato chips. The salt I would crave because of the amount of output I was losing. So this is a perfect example of who I was as a child, headbands and all. It's a glimpse of me in the wild, eating potato chips and getting fed with my hot pink nutritional backpack. As a family, we were going to redefine what normal meant for living with a chronic disease, living with short bowel syndrome. No one had defined that, and we were going to beat expectations. I went to breathe my feeding tube out, regardless if I was eating or not, to enjoy the party first and foremost. Participate in cultural activities, having to hide the feeding tube underneath my dresses. But I participated in dance just like my peers. And then as a high schooler, did a lot of civic service activities. One example is Habitat for Humanity, of course, the one activity that is in the heat and requires physical stamina, but I love doing it with my backpack on. In my 31 years, I've had 31 central lines. Of those 31 central lines, 25 have been infected by bacterial or fungal infections. But one of my most favorite numbers is that I've had the current central line I have now for the last 5 years and counting. We unfortunately had to repair it a couple months ago, but thankfully we were able to repair it and not replace it. So 5 years and counting. And my most favorite number is that it's been 14 years and counting since my last central line infection. Going to school, I went to school just like my peers, but I went with two backpacks. One was my nutritional backpack and two was my academic backpack. I went to school like the true turtle, and I was pertinent to not use my backpack as a weight, as a burden, but rather as a driving force to move forward, to educate my peers, and to understand what it is to live life with IVs and tubes. It was my normal to go to school with IVs and tubes. In the middle of college, I had one more abdominal surgery with the hopes of this one hopefully being the last, but this one being the one that lets me be free of IV and tubes, or at minimum be free of TPN. Unfortunately, it resulted in complications that then resulted in more surgery, more complications at centers all across the United States. For the first time, I was getting adult care. I had no transition of care. Instead, I was referred from a pediatric center to an adult center, and that was it. My parents and I put my care in our own hands. The complications I developed were called fistulas. I had fistulas between my skin, my small intestine, my large intestine, and also my bladder. I was urinating food and bile, and the same food and bile would drain spontaneously on my skin. I was raw both inside and outside. I was struggling to find motivation to move forward. I had to stop college and move back home. It was at this time that our family learned the hard way, the importance of right care at the right place at the right time. We traveled to subspecialty centers across the country discussing my next option. I made the difficult decision to remove my small intestine and large intestine, which I fought for my first 24 years of life, to then only be dependent even more on TPN and IV fluids 24/7, no food by mouth, and all my GI contents drained into a drainage bag that I held on my leg. But this didn't stop us. I was going to continue to defy the meaning of disease. The picture on the left, we went to Big Sur in California, rode the Pacific Coast Highway with my backpack on. You would never know in the picture on the left that I was receiving TPN or IV fluids 24/7, and I had a drainage bag on my leg, and I cannot eat solid food. We ended that trip at a family wedding on the right. And in this period of time, I graduated from college. But the next step was soon, and that was transplant. I made the difficult decision to have a small intestine organ transplant in June of 2014. I was on the waiting list only for 15 days. Since the transplant, I've had highs I've only dreamed of since I was a child. I no longer have a feeding tube. I can eat to my heart's desire with some limitations. And the best part is I don't have pain before, during, or after eating the meal, something I was very accustomed to growing up. But with the highs comes lows. Transplant is not a cure. It can be an exchange of hardships. I've had bacterial and fungal infections requiring more surgery. I've had hip replacements due to a bone disease. I now have a permanent stent in my right ureter, and I have had to get back on TPN to maintain weight and hydration. This is what today looks like. A lot of times chronic disease can be overwhelming. But what my dad always says is, Swapna, you cannot live just for today, because he knows, a lot of people in my family know that I run 100 miles per minute, but rather you have to live for tomorrow. So with chronic disease, a lot of what we do is continuing to show up at doctor's appointments, show up at having to make hard decisions, coordinating care, managing our symptoms daily, weekly, monthly. It has, because of the 30 years of doing this, I've learned that this part of our lives cannot be sacrificed, and respecting the process and the journey allows us to thrive not only for today, but really more so for tomorrow. 65 surgeries in 31 years has taught me that, one, we have to speak up as individuals with chronic diseases, with chronic rare diseases. Your view is important. It is unique. It is okay to be the educator, the trainer, to teach others what it is like to live with the disease, teach decision makers, doctors, and more. We are our best advocates. I wish I was told that when I was younger. Next is knowing that you are not alone. Find others. My life has been changed drastically by finding fellow gutsy gals. We have met each other through Facebook, Instagram, social media, as well as conferences. We now call ourselves gutsy gals with good for nothing guts. It is the text between these women and more, and phone calls, that drive me to continue fighting every day, because I know that someone else gets it. And finally, respecting the big picture. This is what drives me to continue to fight and be an advocate and fight for the milestones we dream of, regardless if they come. Because it is understanding how far we have come to then appreciate how far we will go. Thank you.